Welcome to Kingdom Chat. My name's Jeannie, and this is Caleb, and this is our special guest. This is our son, Stephen.
What's up?
I know that typically Roy is on the couch, and he is behind the soundboard today. He's producing, but we talk a lot about the things that we went through when we found out about his diagnosis, and when he was younger, and so we just thought we would interview him and talk about his life, and also how the Lord has worked in his life. So, Stephen, you want to tell people what your diagnosis is? And
yeah, so it's called Spina Bifida, and a short version of what it is there was a hole formed in my back while I was still in the womb, and it never closed. So when I was still forming, they had to take me out to do a surgery called fetal surgery, where they fixed that hole up and everything and put me back in so that I would be born and
put back in me. Yes.
Yeah.
You were the first person that Nicodemus was talking about. How would man be born again? Did he grow back into his mother's womb?
That's right.
That was Stephen.
It was Stephen.
You must be born again. You were born twice.
And actually, at the time it was done, it was experimental surgery. They didn't know if it would help. He was the 103rd one that had
104th.
104th. I think you're wrong, but 103rd or 104th.
I have the book in my room.
One that ever had it done in 2000 and the year 2000.
But even being 100 people in, that's still groundbreaking.
Yes.
Like,
Oh yeah.
I wonder how many it's been done now.
Oh, a lot, because they don't keep up with it anymore, because once they said it's no longer experimental and it's an accepted form of treatment,
Yeah,
they don't keep up with it anymore.
Wow.
And what was so amazing is that we, as God would have it, we just happened to know, Jeannie's doctor just happened to be best friends with the guy who was doing this experimental surgery. And at the time, they didn't know if it was going to help or not. Since then, they did the trials. Stephen wasn't part of the trials where, basically they have a group where they don't do it and those they do, and they compare them, uses a double-blind study type thing. Stephen wasn't part of the study. He was just the experimental group. Let's do the surgery, see if it helps. And repairing the back while they're still forming in the womb, instead of waiting until after they're born, they hoped would help. And what they found out was, while they were doing the trials, it takes a long time. Women are pregnant. You have to wait for
years.
Yeah, it takes years. But it's very rare that they would. Usually, if they cancel a study, it's because people are being hurt.
Yeah.
In this case, it was doing so much good, and the kids were so much better that they actually stopped the study early and said, we need to start offering this to people. And so now it's the standard practice, and our God knew those things. And Stephen has friends who have, so anytime anybody has a back injury, if you hurt your neck, you're going to be a lot more paralyzed. If you hurt mid-back, a little less, down to the bottom. Stephen's is near the bottom, like L4, L5. And other kids who were born with the exact same diagnosis, Stephen, and they call it a lesion because it's an opening in the back. The lesion in the same area, most of them can't walk at all, whereas Stephen can use crutches. So most of them can't walk at all. So it clearly, and they didn't have that surgery, and Stephen did. So it clearly did help him.
And when he was born, fetal surgery is not a 100% cure. It just makes you better.
Yeah.
So, for example, we knew someone when Stephen was just like a year old. So he was already early 20s, late teens, early 20s, and he was in a wheelchair. He had spina bifida, and someone asked him, said, if this had been available whenever you were in your mother's womb, would you had hoped that they would have done the surgery? And he said, yes. He said, he goes, any change would make the difference between me being able to transfer by myself from the wheelchair to a car, or from the wheelchair to the bathroom. So Stephen was blessed. His paralysis is just below the knee. So he has to have braces, AFOs, ankle foot orthotics. He cannot really walk without them. And he can walk with crutches, but walking with forearm crutches, it's just very hard on your shoulders.
Oh, I'm sure.
And you can't, you tire easier because your shoulders and arms were not made for you to walk on.
Yeah.
So he mostly, as an adult, uses a wheelchair, not at home, but when we go out, because he's faster, he can keep up and all that. Mm-hmm. He also was born with hydrocephalus, so prior to fetal surgery, 90% of all children born with spina bifida had hydrocephalus, 90%. And so that's one of the reasons we considered opting for fetal surgery. But they told me, they did an MRI when I was pregnant with Stephen, and they said his hydrocephalus was so advanced, which hydrocephalus is just your body cannot get rid of the CSF fluid in your brain.
You normally have CSF fluid, right, and the body absorbs it, and you have to recreate it all the time because it's what lubricates your spine, protects your spine, feeds your spine. All the spinal cord, the brain, everything is fed by that, protected by it. And if that drainage system is damaged, which is really it's a group of blood vessels and stuff that do that. But if they become damaged, you get water on the brain, or hydrocephalus, what they call it. And cephala having to do with the brain, hydro having to do with water, so they call it water on the brain. But it's basically just a buildup of that spinal fluid. So Stephen has a shunt in. It goes behind his ear, and it drains the fluid down into his abdomen where his intestines take it out and clean it out.
And typically a shunt will last on average 7 years. Stephen has had 2. He had one at 1 month, and then he had another at 9 months. And he is 24, is that correct? And he has not had another one since. So we feel very, very blessed.
Very blessed.
Wow, that's a miracle in itself.
He was breech. He was a breech baby, which a lot of spina bifida kids are because of the paralysis. They're not moving a lot in the womb.
Whether you realize it or not, the babies are programmed to turn themselves.
Yeah.
But because of being paralyzed, he couldn't do that. And that's almost all babies that they know have spina bifida, they're going to do cesarean section because they end up being breech.
So he was born with what they call bilateral hip dysplasia. So he was basically, the layman's terms, he was born with his hips out of socket. And since they've never been in socket, that's how the ball forms for your hip.
So everything's cartilage when they're born. That's why babies are so bendy. But then as they put weight on there, the body turns what needs to be turned into bone to turn into bone. Because Stephen never walked exactly properly, and he has, even though he can move his legs from his hips to his knees, they're still weaker than normal. Because of that, his hips never formed exactly like yours might. So he doesn't have strong hip bones.
That's
like
why
he
has to have crutches.
It's the weakness from the hips to the legs, and the hip themselves, they're a little wobbly because there's no bone strength that he should have.
Pretty much every child born with spina bifida, they have a neurogenic bladder and a neurogenic bowel, which basically just means they do not work properly. And so he has that. He was born with the syrinx, his syrinx,
which is the Chiari malformation.
Chiari malformation.
The syrinx is something else. That's
yes.
And the Chiari malformation is your hindbrain is what controls breathing, heart rate, digestion, things you don't have to think about. They're done in the hindbrain. And part of his hindbrain, because the spinal cord started getting actually pulled out of his back, it caused his brain to shift, and part of his hindbrain is in his neck. It should not be there. However, because that's another advantage of doing the surgery, putting things back in place quicker, is you don't have a severe amount. He does have a small amount of that, but some kids it's so bad that they end up like at 2-3 years old have to take out some of their neck bone because as that bone begins to form, it starts causing them swallowing problems and things like that because it starts squeezing on the parts of the brain that does that.
And then he did have a syrinx, which is basically pockets of fluid along his spine. But when he was 18, getting ready to go to the adult hospitals, adult doctors, they did a full MRI, and that was no longer.
They all cleared up.
it was all clear.
That's something we really prayed about, because those pockets of fluid can cause serious
They
problems.
can cause pressure on your spine and more paralysis.
It can get so bad that they have to put another shunt in those pockets
just
of
to
fluid
remove
to remove that fluid, which he did not have to do.
And you wouldn't
Thankfully,
think
God
that
for
a
that.
little amount, as small as it could be, would cause as much
'Cause there's no
difficulty.
room.
Correct.
Right.
There's no room.
Because your body is so like I don't know how people could ever claim that we came from a freaking monkey after knowing. And do you know anything about anatomy? Like like just study. Everything had to go together so perfectly,
It does.
so divinely, to have what we have now. And so even the slightest malformation and stuff like that can cause great trouble. So how is it just?
Well, it's the reason why we as adults hurt our backs so easily over time.
Yeah.
Is because the mechanics to make your back work and to keep from pinching a nerve and all that is just so messed up, that are so easy, so perfect, that just is really easy to mess it up.
Yeah.
And then when you have, malformations like this, well, it can do it.
But and also
I've done lost count on how many things you have said that he has dealt with.
yes,
That's a
and
lot.
so he had fetal surgery October 2nd of the year 2000. So I had a C-section, and they removed him from the womb, like he said, repaired his back, and then put him back in, put all the amniotic fluid back in, and then I was on. So let me back up, and I was on medication to help me not go into labor, Tributaline on a Tributaline pump
To prevent labor.
to prevent labor, and I was supposed to be on bed rest, and I was.
Well, I know you weren't.
Yeah, she was
Most-
running around.
I know you ain't changed much.
Not doing
on bed rest. And then when in January 8th of 2001, we went in for another C-section, and he was born. And he was
Dang,
born
had the
on-
scar even healed by the time you
Not
had?
really.
No, and the problem was is they realized when they opened him up, when
When they did the C-section.
yeah, when they did the C-section and took him out, when he was born, that he was still leaking CSF fluids. So
Basically,
Really?
the pressure in this hydrocephalus in his brain got so much
Yeah.
that it put so much pressure all the way down the spinal cord that it ripped itself back open.
yeah.
Good.
And
Yeah.
I was holding him, and he's leaking spinal fluid. And I told him, I said, "You guys, he's leaking spinal fluid." And they're like, "Oh, overreactive father, don't know what you're doing." I was an MRI tech. I was an X-ray tech. I knew what I was talking about. I was CT tech at the time, but anyway, and I hadn't done MRI yet. But I was like, "No, I'm telling you." And they look at it, they go, "Oh gosh, he's right." And so they took him back and tried to sew it up, and then it just filled with fluid. He had like a
pocket?
big golf ball on his back from pocket of fluid.
Yeah.
Well, and with all of that stuff, they still sent him home 4 days later because he was doing pretty good. But then a week later, we went back for the checkup, and Roy said his back's still leaking. So they saw that it was, and so he had to go in and have surgery at a week old to repair his back really well.
It's a lot of fun.
And he had to have a PICC line put in. So a PICC line is like an IV.
But it's really long. It goes
It's real
from the
long.
arm all the way up to the heart almost.
Yes,
direct line for
because he
medicine.
was so little. He was just a baby, and so they couldn't keep an IV in him, so they had to put in a PICC line.
Yeah.
And so they put a PICC line in him. So we ended up staying in the hospital for 2 weeks because the PICC line has to be flushed and all that. And so when they sent him home 2 weeks later, I think it was 2 weeks. Is that right? 2 or 3 weeks?
It's been so long ago, but
And so like here you're on a schedule. We're nursing, and so he has to nurse every 2 to 4 hours, and then every 3 to 4 hours we would have to flush out the PICC line, and so there was a lot of alarms set. We were
and
constantly.
we had cath and stuff
Yes.
like that.
Well, when he was that little, we didn't
We
cath.
did cath yet?
No,
Okay,
we
I
did
can
not
remember.
cath.
Not
Seemed like such a big part of our
catheter.
life. I
Yes,
can't
we
remember.
didn't when he was younger. And so anyway, but it was just a lot of doctor visits. You had 4 surgeries your first year of life.
So hold that right there. I want to ask this. So I know, because I've heard this story, that before he was born, when you found out this was happening, that the Lord both spoke to you and in that moment. And so now we fast forward to after birth. Where are you both as parents at spiritually at this time?
Overwhelmed
Yeah.
is where I was at.
Well, we were overwhelmed, but
Jeannie was probably not as bad as I was.
I just, before we had the surgery and everything, because I knew in my heart that God said this is what you should do, you're overwhelmed because you're exhausted, just like you are when you have a
And I had to
newborn.
go to work.
And Roy had to go to work. It's not like it is now where everybody gets paternity. There was no such thing as paternity leave.
I did not get paternity leave. I was working.
He only had like 2 weeks off.
He's having surgery
and
at
we had
Vanderbilt.
2 other kids at home. We had an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old. So, I mean, we were overwhelmed that ways. But as far as spiritually, I just knew God had a plan for Stephen. I didn't know what it was. Did I have fear that he would die? Yes. And that's part of the story, and then we'll let you talk. So after his maybe second surgery, every time you would go to surgery, they take your child from you, you know. And it's scary, and you just think of all the things that could go wrong. And we had known people within our fetal surgery for Spina Bifida group that their children had died from different complications like that. And so there was a lot of fear whenever he would go to surgery. And I finally just had to come to the conclusion. I prayed. I said, Lord, I don't want him to die. But if it's your will, I know you're going to take him to heaven. And I'm going to serve you anyway. I said, Lord, I'll still grieve.
That's a level of faith
right
there.
I remember Jeannie and I were in the car, and I looked at her. I said, what are we going to do if he dies? And she looked at me. She said, we're going to serve Jesus anyway.
Yeah.
And I said, I agree. But we both had to... I don't know. For some reason, I need to hear it out loud.
Well, yeah, because I think when you speak the truth out loud, when you say the hard thing out loud, it frees you from the bondage of the fear of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, as a father, that's how the enemy knows. You can come at me all these different ways, but when you come after my kids and my wife, that's my soft spot. And a lot of men and a lot of families, a lot of people struggle with spiritual battles, physical battles, health battles, and it's like the first thing that we do is we look at the fight, we look at the fear of what happens if XYZ, instead of doing what y'all did. And Lord, I trust you anyway. I'm gonna give it to you anyway. I'm gonna give you, when you give Stephen to the doctor, you might as well have been putting him in the Lord's hands, like physically. Mm-hmm. And I think that's such an important, because the thing that I'm hearing that the Lord is speaking right now is the key to this whole thing is perspective.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. The perspective that we're praying from the finished part of this, not from the beggars. We're not a beggar. We're co-heirs. And when we realize who we are and whose we are, and that, these doctors and these people have been raised up for such a time as this, but my daddy is not a healer, he's the healer. Yeah. It will change everything.
I think too, people, you go to all these conferences and people are like, you got to give your kids to the Lord. Well, that means that you're trusting the Lord even if he takes them home.
Yeah.
But it's our belief. And I told the Lord, I said, if something happens to Stephen, I will grieve.
Oh, yeah.
I will be sad, but I'm going to trust you anyway. That's literally what I told him.
And the thing is that too, is like, not long after Stephen was born, we found out Jeannie's mom had cancer. Mm. And so within 6 months, she was gone too. And I think that was the only thing wherein I saw Jeannie break.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very hard to lose my mom.
And
such a tough time in your life already.
My mom had been sick for about 8 years. She'd been pretty, sickly, and not able to work. And my mom was not a person to stay home. I mean, my mom was a worker, and she couldn't work for about the last 7 years up at that time. And then by that following Christmas, my mom died, and Jeannie was over there trying to make dinner for her, and I got a phone call, and my mom had a heart attack, and I had to do CPR on my mom. And
oh my goodness!
Yeah, and so I panicked at first, and then I said, "No, Roy, you know what to do." And I started doing it, and
it was a rough couple of years.
And
we
got her back. Then they got her ambulance. She had another heart attack, and they got her back. And then we got to the hospital, had another heart attack. They brought her back. It's just a constant fight all night long. And then finally, my mom passed away. There was a lot going on in our lives.
But
for 2 years
I will say
there.
this, like we've discussed on this podcast before, that we didn't make the decision to serve Jesus when we found out Stephen's diagnosis. Yeah. We already trusted and believed in Jesus. Our faith had just never been tested. This was the test.
Yeah.
And you can't. It's very difficult to trust in Jesus if you haven't made your mind up beforehand that he is the Lord.
Regardless of what it looks like.
He's not just a God.
Come on.
He is the Lord, the Savior. You know, and so many people, I've always said this, and this may come across wrong. If it does, you can cut it from the podcast. But I always said it takes much more faith to say God no matter what than to believe that He's always going to heal. Because it's not always God's will. We don't know why, but it's not always God's will. Sometimes it's His will to take them home. Yeah. And I knew in my heart that even though I would miss Stephen or anyone, that he's better off in heaven. Yeah. You know, in a perfect world.
Somebody doesn't need to misunderstand. Me and Jeannie believe in healing. I believe God could do it.
I believe Stephen was healed, though.
I believe that God could heal him even further.
Yes.
I believe it all my heart, all my soul, all my mind. I do not have any lack of faith in that regard. But I also know what is more important is that that Stephen serves Jesus as he is. Yeah. Because you can be healed and still go to hell.
Absolutely.
You know, and so a physical healing is not as important as a spiritual healing. Because if you're not healed spiritually, 10,000 years from now, none of this is going to matter.
Right.
You know, and there were people Jesus healed who I don't think were right with him. Because remember, you got 10 lepers, only one came back to thank him, right? Yeah. The rest of them, we don't know what happened to them. They went on their way. But only one came back and was grateful. Yeah. And out of you wonder about them other 9. Did they go back into sin? What happened? You know, I don't know. It didn't seem like they were ready to be righteous. That's for sure.
And another thing I wanted to point out that basically from the time Stephen was born to probably about 19 or 20, our whole world, our girls' world, our world, everything revolved around Spina Bifida. You know, and it wasn't always bad. He got to fly airplanes. He got to ride horses. He got to play sled hockey and wheelchair basketball and do all this amazing stuff.
We met amazing people along the journey.
We traveled all over the Southeast to make all of that happen. So it took over our world, but it made us who we are today. But my question now for Stephen is, do you want to tell? We've never even asked you. How do you feel? Like, what are your memories of being a child, and how do you feel about your spina bifida, or growing up, or whatever?
Well, I know for a while I never told you guys this, but I genuinely did deal with a lot of depression. And when you're a kid, you don't realize you're depressed when you are depressed. But I just, but like, I mean, how are you gonna be a kid? And you're the only kid in your class in a wheelchair, right? I mean, like how does that
even
work?
In public school?
That
he went to a Christian school when he was younger. It was very small, so he was the only disabled person there. Yeah. Period. But even when he went to the high school and public school, there's thousands of kids there. I think you were the only one in a wheelchair there. They had other disabilities, but not
like all of them. Those kids were in like the special needs classes. So like I was the only one that wasn't. Yeah. But and like another thing too is like when you're a kid, you want to hang out with everybody. You want to be friends with everybody. But like I didn't realize at the time, a lot of the kids that hung out with me hung out because I'm in a wheelchair. And then when I got older, I think it was around like 5th, 6th grade or something, is when I realized who my true friends are. Because I had so many people distance themselves from me, and I had a couple people still hang out with me, but even the ones that hung out with me, I didn't realize, are they hanging out with me because they like me, or are they hanging out with me because I'm in a wheelchair, you know?
You're a project.
Exactly.
You're we're going to help you out type thing.
Exactly. That's how I felt. I had that confusion in my mind for years.
I think when you were like in elementary school, like kids don't mean to be... They don't always mean to exclude other kids. They're just being kids themselves. But, they would all go run off and play. Well, Stephen couldn't. Yeah. Because he was either on his crutches or with his wheelchair. And so he was excluded from a lot of stuff unless Roy and I went with him and we would pick him up and carry him. I remember his first away from us birthday party, overnight party. He was probably 4th or 5th grade, and it was a sleepover, and they had a 2-story house, and they had called and just asked, and I said, the thing is, Stephen can go upstairs and he can come downstairs, but unlike other kids, he can't do that 50 times. Yeah. Once they go upstairs, they really need to stay for an hour or two before they come down. And you feel bad telling other people restrictions on their own kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And what I have to one of the things that I think humbled me, and I don't mean this in a bad way. I'm not really bad toward people in any way, but the most, gosh, how do I say this without sounding condescending? The most backwards people we met in our life were the best people to Stephen.
That's
the
true.
most uneducated,
Mm-hmm.
the ones with the worst teeth, the ones with the lowest income, were the ones that treated Stephen the best.
It is true.
Because
It was
even
true.
though Spina Bifida sort of took over our lives, Stephen was never our son with Spina Bifida. He was our son.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think when people, even now, sometimes when they meet him, I don't usually say, unless we're looking for him, my son in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
It's like, my son.
Well, the most uneducated people that we ended up like maybe meeting through Boy Scouts or whatever, they would come up to me. So if Stephen comes over our house, how do we do this? How do we do that? I never saw the most educated or the richest people ever ask us anything
that's
like
true.
that.
That's true.
They always asked us. They were always just forward about it,
Yeah.
and they were always overwhelmingly willing to go out of their way
Yeah.
to help him to be included.
Is that not like the kingdom of God?
Yes.
Yeah.
The word says the last will be
Dang.
first,
Yes, that's so
and the
good.
first will be last.
It humbled me.
Yeah.
And I see some of those people today, and they're working some of the low end jobs in this town, and they're my age now, but they're still working some of the lowest end jobs in this town. And I look at them and I love them
Yeah.
because they were so good to us.
They were very good. Stephen
They were
did.
so
Stephen
good
did
to
Boy
Stephen.
Scouts. You did. So
Yeah.
what else besides that? I mean, good and bad. You had good stuff and you had bad stuff. What else do you remember from your childhood?
I mean, I do remember, like Mom said, I did a lot of like wheelchair basketball, sled hockey. I played a bunch of sports, so I got to have friends that had like
Yes.
my problems and other problems that I didn't have physically and mentally. But like, so I did have a lot of those friends. But again, it was. I
But we
still dealt with a lot of
lived
it.
so far away. We
Yeah,
live
we-
in a small town, so we would drive every weekend an hour to the closest big city
Yeah.
where all of that took place. So he couldn't be like.
Because we don't have
friends.
resources like that
Yeah.
around here.
No, and he couldn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't friends you could hang out with like you normally would in middle school and high school because
That's
they were
true.
so far away.
Yeah, that is true.
What do you think the impact was on you having the parents that you had, as opposed to other kids that didn't? Even kids, did you know, that had spina bifida that maybe didn't have the most supportive parents? Did you ever come across that? Because I know when I was growing up, I was one of the kids that my parents loved me. There's no doubt about that, but I didn't see them very often. It was not a great relationship, and this is obviously, you say what you feel, but it seems like you had a great relationship with your parents, and you had a great support system, which I think does make all the difference in anything that you go through in your life. If you don't have a firm foundation first in Christ, which they did, and you don't have a support system because you're going to need help at some point, how do you think that impacted your life as you stand now?
Honestly, that's a very tough question to answer. I mean, I just know I'm thankful for having these people in my life and stuff. But
Well, and back to your question, for the most part, because we were sacrificing our time and money for Stephen to do all these sports and stuff, those parents were sacrificing as well. So those were parents who spent time with their
Yeah,
kids.
most of the ones we hung around with were the ones that were doing the same thing.
Yes.
We were.
yeah,
And so
that's part of the reason it's so hard to answer
Yeah.
that question.
Yeah.
yes, and but we were also always there to tell you that God had a special plan for your life.
Yeah.
And we always told Stephen that you can do anything you want to do, anything like anyone else. You just have to find a different way to do it.
Yeah.
Because physically, you can't. And, but for the most part, okay, so he went to Christian school through 8th grade. And, Christian schools are not bound by IDEA and all of those 504s and all of the things you have to do. But yet, for the most, I think they did a really good job making sure you had the right kind of desk and can go to the bathroom in time, because Stephen had to catheters to go to the bathroom.
I had to cath on a specific
schedule at school. But I mean, can you think of any time? We'll start with the Christian school that you felt excluded or anything.
Well, so whenever I got into like high school specifically, we had PE, and like because it was a Christian school, they would always separate the guys and the girls for that kind of stuff. And the guys would be outside, and the girls would be in the gym. And it being in grass, in a wheelchair, that's not going to mix well.
So I do remember that. I forgot about that. So he had to sit around a lot. They would play football. Or they would play stuff, and Stephen could not play that because it was a small school.
And I was just watching them the whole time. Couldn't really do much anything else.
Yeah.
And then I know Mom and Dad had come and said, hey, can you, have one of your students hang out with Stephen in the parking lot area?
Yeah, he could push or something.
Yes, and just hang out. And all that the principal did was he took one of the basketball goals from the gym that you could just I think it had like water in it or something.
Oh yeah.
And like he brought that outside, and brought a basketball, and had me play in the parking lot by myself.
He left you in the parking lot with a ball?
Yeah. Well, they were playing on the grass outside.
It was like a few feet away. But it was like 10 feet away.
But my thought was that they'd have another kid to help him get the ball.
I mean,
but they never would do that. And I'd asked him multiple times to do that, and he wouldn't. He even told me he would do it.
And I think part of the problem is if you've never had a child with a disability, you just don't know.
Yeah.
You don't understand. You don't know how to do that. And I hope that. But other than that, I remember when you got a new wheelchair one year, they when I said something about getting a new wheelchair, they were even like, "Oh, you're going to need a bigger desk." And I thought that was kind because there was no government
regulation.
And they're not funded by the government either.
They're not funded by the government, so they don't have to. And public school, what about public school when you went there for 9th through 12th? Any issues there?
I mean, the only real issue was like they had this one wing that used to be the 9th grade wing, but because of how many kids started coming, they created a whole new area that they call in the 9th grade school.
So what he's saying is, so when he went to 9th grade, we had one whole school. Are you talking about the high school?
I'm talking about both.
Anyway, that was 9th grade.
Yeah.
But they, at one point in time, and just an area of it was 9th grade.
Yeah.
And it was
the newer portion, but it had
like an incline.
Yeah, they had. That's what I was getting at. They had this ramp that like it felt like it was like a 45-degree angle.
Yeah, because it was built on the stairs, so it was sharp.
Yeah. So like I had to go up that every so often, but thankfully they would always like schedule that class at the end of the day every year if I had to take a class in that wing. So that wasn't that big of an issue, but still having to go up 45 degrees in a wheelchair.
And it's one of those things that we could have asked for accommodations.
That is
but
true.
Our theory was too, it's like, Stephen, in life, you may get a job that has this. You're not always going, you're going to have to learn. If it's something you cannot do, then yes, we'll ask for accommodations.
Of course.
But, for the most part, we need to find a way to help you overcome that, because in life you're just going to have things thrown at you.
Yeah.
But since you went to Christian school your entire life, I know that you still dealt with depression because we talked about that before, but how does having faith in God, you think, like, help you get through the depression and helped you accept your spina bifida? Because he was always so happy. He always was just like, okay, this is what I have, spina bifida. This is just me.
It's just, it sounds simple, but it's not. I would just pray all the time, and God would like give me that clarity that he had a plan that I didn't know, I didn't have any control over and everything. So whenever he'd do that, I'd feel a little bit happier about myself. But being depressed, you're still gonna, have that thought over and over and over again.
But do you think that if you didn't have faith in God, that it would have been worse?
Oh, 100%. Like, it definitely would have been worse and everything. But, and I think it really was my faith that even got me out of it in the first place.
Absolutely.
Because I don't think I could have ever gotten out of that place. Even with family and friends. I really could not have.
Well, you see a lot of times in the world now, even the happiest people, the funniest people, the people who look like they have everything are often struggling the worst.
Yeah. Because they don't want to, like, coming from someone who was depressed, they don't want other people to feel what they're feeling, you know?
Well, I think a lot of preteens and teenagers deal with depression anyway.
Yeah.
And then you
That's
add
true.
on, because you feel rejected and you feel like you don't fit in and you feel unusual. And then
That
you
is true.
have a disability that you're dealing with, because it was not always easy.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, I mean, I don't want to talk about those stories, but there was a lot of, they're mostly funny now, but there's just a lot of stories, you know, like, you know, if you're in Nashville in a big conference convention center and there's a fire alarm, you do realize that no longer do the elevators work in a fire and all that, and the escalator worked, and that was fun. And so
I was not with them. I was somewhere else, and it was her and Deanna and Steven.
So I'm carrying a wheelchair in one hand and trying to hold on to Steven. He's got his crutches. He'd never been on an escalator before, so we're going up like this, and he almost falls. So
He almost falls backwards.
backwards. Deanna's behind him to catch him. She goes, "You didn't love me because you were letting him fall on me." Before she started catching him, and we get to the top of the escalator, and I was so afraid his feet or something would get caught. So she pushes him.
Oh my goodness.
But he survived.
She propelled him. She was very helpful.
It was a good thing I had my hands to stop me from hitting his face.
Yeah, Deanna was a lot of help.
But, you know, it's all just...
This is my chance.
It was just a learning curve, but, you know, it's one of those things that I used to ask God, you know, I know you have a plan, because I'm not saying that we were always like Snow White and whistling to birds. There was a lot of times there was, you know, you'd get frustrated, and there was a lot of yelling and a lot of, you know, just a lot of things. I would tell you in private. We're not going to go through it here.
It didn't help that you did have a stubborn son.
And then, you know, and Steven wouldn't be able to,
stubborn.
you know, he would have one pair of braces, because they're thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
The wheelchairs, they're not electric, but they're thousands of dollars.
Yeah, because they're custom made.
Even after insurance, I mean,
you know,
we're
I
still
remember
paying
crying.
thousands out of my pocket.
Yeah, crying
Lost
in
a
a shoe store because we couldn't find shoes to fit over his braces. Just sitting there crying because life shouldn't be that hard type thing.
Yeah,
but it doesn't mean I doubted God. I was just, oh gosh, sort of like Elijah when he got down and Elijah said, you know, Elijah just seen God perform the miracle on Mount Carmel, you know, and defeat the prophets of Baal.
And he's running the next minute.
And then Jezebel says he's going to kill, and then he's like, just let me die. Just let me die. Yeah. Well, we had those days.
She probably wasn't even that scary. She's, I'm going to get you.
Yeah. but you know, but we had those days where we were just overwhelmed. But God knows that we're weak.
Yeah.
Jesus lived here. He knows what we go through and that we're weak. And so, you know, when people have those oh me, oh my days and you cry and you don't, God understands.
Yeah.
But it didn't mean that I didn't trust in God. I sometimes questioned the fact that he thought we were strong enough to handle it.
Hey, people
I didn't feel strong.
Well, people will say things like, well, you know, God gave you this child because they knew you were strong enough to handle it. Number one, no. Okay? God didn't give us Stephen and say, hey, I'm going to give you a handicapped child. Stephen was born in a world that's full of sin where people are born handicapped. It's not because he sinned or we sinned. It's because we live in a sinful planet where people are sick and die. Babies are born deformed, things like that. That's why he's sick. Now, could God have stopped it? Yes. Do I wish he had? No. Yes, absolutely. But he did things that were wonderful for us, such as the surgery that was experimental and things like that. And he put people in our life who could help us and guide us through this that he didn't have to do. Yeah. And so, did he do everything I wanted him to do? Sometimes no, but sometimes yes. Sometimes he did more than I thought of. Yeah. Ultimately, it made us come to the things you hear. But when you live things, it's different than hearing things, right? When you hear that it's more important to live right than to be healthy, those are words. But when you're living it, you realize this is really true, because this world is temporary.
Yeah.
10,000 years from now, it's going to matter more if we've accepted Christ than if we were able to run and jump and all the other things. And you really realize those things. But is it easy while you're going through it? No.
Right.
And I'm working like crazy. Jeannie, when he was younger, she couldn't work, so there's a loss of income there.
Yeah.
And I'm working a job that I absolutely hated, with people that were absolutely cruel to me. I'm not making that up. They were cruel to me. But I had to stay there because we needed health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And with health insurance, we were still paying over $500 more a month just for monthly medical supplies, let alone all the
co-pays
debt.
and surgeries
and all the debt that we had, the tens of thousands of dollars.
It's not like we could pay all these
debt.
off.
No.
From fetal surgery. Fetal surgery in 2000 was $30,000, and most of the time, insurance won't even pay if it's considered experimental.
Yeah.
We had to contest it. Our insurance did, but you still have your deductibles and copays. The first year of his life, he had at least 4 surgeries, and they paid out over $100,000. And this was in 2000, well before Obamacare. And so that's when I realized that there's a lifetime max that your insurance would pay.
Oh, really?
So we are thinking,
we're going to hit it.
We're like, even if it's $1 million, if he has surgery every year and it's $100,000 a year.
What happens after you hit that?
You have no insurance.
You have no insurance. But here's the thing that was so cool. What was so cool about our God was that we would be getting near the limit, and my company would change insurance companies, and we go back to zero.
Yeah, anytime you change insurance companies, it goes to zero.
And so they would decide to change companies, and it happened to us more than once. Wherein my company changed insurance companies, I went back to zero. So we weren't at our max again.
He's so good.
He kept. But now, was there a lot of money still coming out of my pocket? Yeah. $500 a month minimum. Yeah. Plus all the other stuff, and then like when we get a wheelchair that costs $5,000. Well, they're only paying part of that. I'm paying the rest of that, And so it was just when he's getting braces that are $2,000, they're not paying 100% of that, Wow. And there was this idea. People got this idea that if you're born handicapped child, the government hands you money.
No.
They don't do
Stephen
that.
never got government help.
No, he didn't get government help. Stephen did not get any kind of thing like that until he turned 18. We were able to apply for TennCare.
Yeah.
But even now, while he's not quite 26 years old, he goes, my insurance pays first, then TennCare pays the rest. And then what that allowed us to do was whenever they took over my monthly, what I was paying out of my pocket, we used that to pay off all this debt that we still accrued for 20 years, 18 years worth of medical debt that we were in. We were up to debt in my eyeballs. And I remember one of the things for me was a help is I worked with a guy named Wesley Jenkins, and they'd go out to lunch every day. I could not afford to go out to lunch. There's no way. Wesley understood that. And he'd say, "You're going, and I'm paying." We'd have arguments. I'm Leslie, you pay for me all the time. I'm not going. He goes, "Roy, come with me." That he would force me to go eat with him. And I'm like, "Wesley, I can never pay you back for it." He goes, "You don't have to." And he was a good man, and it was a treat because getting to go out and eat like that, I couldn't afford it. And you're struggling. I feel guilty because Jeannie didn't go out and eat. And I'm getting to go out to these restaurants in Murfreesboro every time. And anytime Wesley worked with me, I say, "I'm not going with you today." He goes, "Yes, you are. Don't be stupid." He was so good to me, and he didn't have to be.
Well, and it's one of those things that we would realize the way the Lord worked as we were going through it. But most of the things we realize afterwards. Like now, as we look back on Stephen's 24 years, I see things that at the time was just like, "Oh, I'm glad this happened."
Yeah.
But now you're like, "Oh, that's the Lord's hand."
That's like when 2020 happened. We had a contract to buy a house, which was a dream for us, and it was perfect. Everything was great, and I remember praying very specifically, "Lord, if this is ours, then I know you'll make a way, and Lord, if this is not for us, then you won't let it happen." We lost that house.
And you feel devastated.
Due to no fault of our own. I was just broken over it. But I said, Lord, if this is your plan, this is what we'll do. A year later, we find Brenda has a brain tumor.
Oh, yeah.
And I spent 12 weeks off of work, or we would have lost that house.
Yeah.
And so he protected us from the fate that we would have seen, and what I keep hearing and feeling throughout this conversation, going back to kind of what you said about the ups and the downs, is He's the same God today he was back then when he led the Israelites out of Egypt. He's the same God who's still showing up, who's still providing. And sometimes we're still those same people who, thank you, Lord, for the manna. Thank you, Lord. You just brought us out here to kill us.
Hey, man, I'm getting tired of tasting manna.
Oh, well, this is great. We need some water. Or we need, and just, sometimes we're still the same.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, I'm so slow, so it took all these years for those things to happen for me to get the faith I probably should have had from the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
So the day I took off vacation day to sign the mortgage on this house, my boss calls me while I'm having dinner, our first dinner in our home. So excited, new home. He calls me, telling me I'm laid off. And I'm like, you could have told me that before I signed a 30-year mortgage. What the heck?
We built this house. It had been going on for months.
Yeah, I've been months working on this house. He knew it. And he lays me off the day that I signed a 30-year mortgage. He waits till I come home from the bank to tell me that I don't have a job anymore. And I was devastated. And Jeannie goes, we were planning on going buy stuff for the house, Jeannie goes, what are you doing? I said, we're going to eat this meal. We're going shopping. I was mad, but it wasn't a pleasant shopping trip. It was, but that was long before Stephen came. But all these things happened. And unfortunately, it took all these things in my life. Yeah. For me, the next time something happened, I'm like, well, God, you got this. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? But I wasn't always that easy.
Because of all the tests or trials that we've been through, I'm not saying that if something came up now that I would just
be upset.
But it has made us realize we've seen God come through and work. And like you said, not always in the way that we thought it should work out. But it's always worked out for our good, even if we had to struggle for sometimes years.
Oh, man.
It makes you trust in God more.
I remember so many times looking at situations and in my mind, in my carnal thinking, Lord, if you don't do this, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know how this is going to happen. And he's like, okay, then do this. And it's always in a way that I never could have even thought of.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, you think about it in the Bible, people will read something and God performed this miracle, so now everybody thinks that's the only way that miracle can be done. But God, I can't think of any time that he really
does it the same
way twice.
Yeah.
And people just don't need to realize that God wants us to know that it's him.
Yeah.
And we have to rely on him, so he's going to do it in a way that we understand.
There's no blueprint for how he touches people.
Right.
You look at all the times he healed blind and lame. Each way was different. Each one was different. Sometimes it was faith of others. Sometimes it was faith of the lame. Sometimes it was faith of the people speaking.
Sometimes he just put dirt.
Sometimes he just spit on them. I mean, he spit on them. So, and it just reminds, in the church, we're so cutesy. We'll talk James 1 verse 2. Consider it all joy when you go through trials until you're the one going through the trial.
I can honestly say about that verse that I did not practice that.
Yeah.
I did not have joy in my trials. Not ever.
I've heard so many people say it's okay to question God, but I cannot tell you how many times I've said, why me? Why us? Why, why this? Not meaning I didn't have faith in God, but just frustrated and go, I think you got it wrong, God.
Because we think we know better, right?
People stronger than us.
Well, the joy of the Lord is our strength, and I have to tell myself that. So even just Sunday, getting up to go to work this Sunday morning, almost everything that could go wrong went wrong. I spilled my coffee as I'm trying to get ready. I already woke up late. I get in the car and I forgot something. I had to go back, get to work. So everything and I was like, Lord, I don't get my joy from a circumstance. And I have to tell myself that. And a lot of people, if things are going good, it's easy to have joy. When things are going bad, it's easy to not have joy. But we have got to get away from I'm only happy if life is good.
Yes.
Because that's not how we command. It's commanded. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The strength that I draw from is from Him, and I don't need need things to be going right to be happy. And I don't have to be in this place where, woe is me, blah, 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 blah. And if you're hearing anything that we're talking about today, listen to this story. Have you heard? Have you paid attention? Lord, I just pray that the people that are watching this video have really received this story of faith into their spirit, the testimony off of one child. The testimonies that Stephen has went through is more than some of these people will ever see in their life. And you've done so many things in the first few weeks of his life. And he can do it. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. If he'd done it once, he'll do it again, and he'll do it for you. If you've got a child who's going through some things, if you have a struggling pregnancy, if your family's not healthy, take heart. Take heart, because he is near to the brokenhearted. He is near to those who draw him. And I heard it so beautifully, I think by that evangelical guy who was preaching. He said, he will draw all men to him. He said, I'll drag you. I will pull you to myself. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes we won't let go of the things that are pulling us away from him. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I need him to pull me back before I do something stupid. Mm-hmm. And so I have been just overwhelmed. And take time and testify of the Lord. Mm-hmm. The word said that we have overcome the evil one by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, and they did not love their lives unto death.
That's right.
Ooh,
we
always forget that part.
Yeah. And one of the things, I'm going to say this, and it's going to make somebody mad, but it is scripture, and I'm going to say it anyway. One of the things that bothers me that a lot of churches do, and Pentecostals are some of the worst, they quote Isaiah where he says, by his stripes we are healed. And they only think about physical healing. Yeah. And that's not what he was come to do. Do I believe he does physical healing? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But he's talking about spiritual healing there. And spiritual healing is much more important than physical healing. Yeah. Look at Lazarus. Jesus raised him from the dead, but you know what? He still died again. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Listen, by his stripes we're healed is talking about spiritual healing. Do I want you to believe that Jesus heals people? Yes. Yeah. But that scripture is really talking about him healing us spiritually because we are spiritually dead without Jesus Christ. And that is far more important that we take care of that than anything physical. Because some of us every single one of us, unless Jesus comes back again, every one of us is riding out on a hearse one day. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Every one of us is going to die. And, but by his stripes we're healed. Wait a minute. But here's what you got to know. But by his stripes we are healed. I'm still going to heaven. Mm-hmm. So even though you may be taking my body and my corpse and throwing it in the ground, that's the old man. That man's not me no more. Mm-hmm. Because by his stripes I was healed, and I will be in heaven, and I'll be given a new body, right? Mm-hmm. And so we need to understand that we need to stop being so carnal minded.
Come on.
And be more spiritually minded. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the things I thought was so funny, when Jeannie was working a job before she became children's pastor, I'll leave the guy nameless because he's a great guy. He really is. But he said something that was just so funny. Basically, he told Jeannie, he was asking her about.
I've always been real peppy and happy.
But not only that, she was talking about. He asked her about her faith, and so she told him about her faith, and he goes, "Well, that's because you've never been through any trials." And she said, "Oh, really?"
She got no idea.
And
buddy.
She started laying down everything we've been through years, and he didn't know this, and he's like, "Oh, wow," because to him, you're just happy and serving Jesus because you've been through nothing but glory your whole life. Mm-hmm. And she's like, my dad was an alcoholic, my parents are divorced, and and she's going through her life, and she gets in and you're still happy? She goes, because I still know Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. The word says, don't fear those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both
body and soul.
Body and soul.
That's right.
And cast it into hell.
Yes. And so that's why.
But that's what the Bible says. The beginning of all wisdom is fear the Lord.
Yep.
And I know for a fact that probably one of my worst problems is not fearing God like I should.
Oh, yeah.
Because it causes me to give into gluttony because I don't fear God like I should. There's times I do. There's days I do. Yeah. But it's not every day. And there's times that I say things that I shouldn't say. You know why? Because I don't fear the Lord.
Yeah. I think a lot of things. I may not say them anymore, but I think a lot of things I have to ask forgiveness for.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to fear the Lord. We need to. And
I tell you what, I feel like I spend so much of my time taking thoughts captive, it drives me crazy.
Me too.
I'm like, Lord, am I crazy?
Yeah, you are, but that's the second one.
And we still don't know what God has planned for Stephen's life. But for the last year or so, he has been assisting assistant teacher in a kindergarten, first and second grade boys class at our church. And he's just so kind and friendly.
Yeah.
People love to talk to Stephen.
Yeah.
They tell me all the time, we just love talking to Stephen. He's so friendly and nice, and they just feel joyful when they're around you, not because you're in a wheelchair, but because of who you are and who lives inside of you.
I take all the credit for that.
You always do.
Well, I used to have one of my best friends growing up in elementary school was in a wheelchair, and he lived down the road from me, so we hung out all the time. But this dude was not as nice as you. I mean, he took joy in running me over all the time. And
he did when he was younger. I think he did. He used to clip my ankles. He would.
You probably deserved it.
He would get my Achilles tendon so often that today I'm still afraid of him. I still watch him, and he goes, "I'm not going to hit your dad because I'll be watching when he's behind me." I'm like, "You made me nervous. You got to get in front of me."
Well, and I also just want, if you're out there, if you listen all the way to the end, just let you know, Stephen's life has been full. Like when he was in high school, he was in school plays. He was main characters. He was the king in Romeo and Juliet. He was in Hairspray.
He's been in church plays too.
He played in he was in church stuff. He was in choir. He's done competitions. He's been to the National Wheelchair Basketball Association games and played in them. And he's just got to do so many different things.
Stephen's lived more than some of you bums on the couch watching this video.
I've never flown an airplane.
He used to go water skiing.
Hockey.
If you've never seen adaptive water skiing every summer, that was always
big
fun.
Enough boat to make me water ski.
That's right. But they sit. They have special. It's the slalom ski.
I did that.
They have a thing, and they sit on. They sit on it. And they pull it. Yeah.
That's what I need.
And so I mean, he's really had so much opportunity and been so blessed. But once again, that's because God. We didn't know any of that stuff existed. It's not like
people
we
would just show up and tell us about this stuff, and we didn't even go looking for half of it.
Right.
So it was a real blessing when we found a group. And if you wanted to give some money to a handicap group, I recommend Able Youth more than anybody in the world in Nashville, Tennessee. And the guy who founded it, Rick Slaughter, he has a book that he wrote about him becoming paralyzed. And at first he did it for sports, but then he realized kids needed more than just sports. But nonetheless, I remember Rick taught us as parents how to be parents to a handicapped child, because he's like, you don't know either, and we didn't. And so one of the number one things that he told us to do, and I'll never forget it, he said, stop helping them so much. They need to learn to take care of themselves as much as they are able.
He became paralyzed with an accident in high school, and he said that, for people who are not born handicapped, you go to rehab. And they teach you how to clean your house and how to transfer. They
don't do that for kids who are born.
But when you're born, there is no rehab. You've always been that way.
Yeah.
So we didn't know how. Like Stephen was like, I don't know, maybe 4th or 5th grade. And at that point in time, he was still in the tub. And I would have to bend over and pick him up. And I told him one day, I said, I tell you, you're killing my back. I don't know how much longer I can do this. He goes, oh, I can get out by myself. And I said, you can?
He just let her.
Yeah. He said, they taught us at one of our weekend Able Youth things.
She said, how long have you been doing this?
And like, for reference, this was I think a week or so before or after I was taught this.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
But
you should have lied and told her a long time.
Yeah, Able Youth, besides their sports thing, they used to go away for like a day or two, a weekend. Yeah. In Nashville, these cabins.
Teach them how to cook and clean.
Teach them how to cook and clean and do stuff and how to think outside of the box. I remember one time they did this thing where they had bags of groceries, plastic bags of groceries, and they're like, how are you going to get them in? And, of course, they're kids. They don't know because the parents had always done it for them. And one of the adults that would come, she starts putting it on all different parts of her wheelchair.
Oh, yeah.
And then rolling it in. She goes, you've got to think outside of the box. You can't always, not every house is going to be accessible. You've got to think outside the box.
And I remember, because like in our house, the downstairs we built later. And so all the doors are wider and it's handicap accessible, but Stephen's not always down here. Yeah. And upstairs is not, and they're narrow doors and everything else, so he doesn't go around the house in a wheelchair because it just and he doesn't feel like using crutches all the time.
And we don't have ramps in the house. We go steps.
He would crawl everywhere, and he still does. And felt horrible about that. And so one of the things like Able Youth did is there was a girl that came, she was like 19 years old, and she was there for parents to talk to her and ask her questions. And one of the things somebody says, my kid's crawling everywhere. And she goes, perfect. She goes, well, when I do too all over my house. She goes, it's just easier. I get out of my chair. I just drag and pull myself everywhere, do whatever I want to do. She said, but I started doing that at college and it made my college friends nervous, so I stopped doing it around them. She said, but when I'm home, I do it everywhere, and that helped us to relax and just let Stephen do that.
It's okay.
And so there were so many things that he was taught by Able Youth, but there were so many things that we were taught as well by Able Youth. It's a fantastic group. If you want to give money to a nonprofit organization, Able Youth in Nashville, I recommend them highly. They help a lot of people in this area, and a brilliant group. And Rick has stepped down. He's no longer over it, but nonetheless, still run by wonderful people, and it's just a fantastic group.
Well, Stephen, is there anything you want to add, man? Anything you want to say?
I was thinking, I had a story from whenever you were talking about that verse in Isaiah. Honestly, like, I actually had an experience with someone in college address that similar thing. Like, I went to Lee University, which is a Christian college, and like they had chapel one day, and like they're praying, worshiping, and this one lady comes up to me. She's like, I think she was a student, but she's like, hey, is it okay if I pray for you? And like I felt weird about it, like in my spirit. So I was praying. While she was praying, I was saying, God, I don't know why she's here. I don't know what she's doing, but like I trust you just to handle this the way that you'll handle this. And then after she was done praying, she was like, if you have enough faith and you pray enough, God will heal you. And so I said, kind of like what Mom said, like God doesn't need to heal me physically. I already had that healing spiritually.
Come on.
And everything. And then after that, she was like, well, if a person's born with a sickness, don't you want them to be healed? And at that point, I'll admit, I didn't say anything after that, but in my head, what I wanted to say was, are you stupid?
Yeah.
Because, how are you equating a sickness to a physical disability?
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, that's the thing is that, would we take healing heartbeat?
Yeah.
Without hesitation. However, I'm more worried about Stephen's spiritual healing than physical healing. Now, if God, trust me and God had some serious conversations about this healing, okay? And I've told you before that I had a lady that I worked with that told me that if I had enough faith, I could pray and God would heal my son. And so I asked her to pray for my son since she had so much faith. And she got big-eyed and ran down the hallway away from me. And I was chasing her down the hallway at work. And I'm like, but where's your faith? Come heal my son. And she ran away, literally ran away from me,
funny.
And I was like, it made me mad, and she did this in front of a bunch of lost people, and I was like, what happened here? When it was about my faith, I got not enough faith. That's why my son's paralyzed. When I put it on you, you ran out the room. So listen, I believe in healing. If anybody watches think I don't believe in healing, I absolutely believe he could heal Stephen. But that's not the most important thing. Physical healing is not more important.
And there's
than
degrees
to
healing.
There is.
And in our opinion, we know people with spina bifida that are much worse off than Stephen physically. And so,
Well, that's like what Jeannie said earlier. I mean, we knew people whose son had Chiari malformations much worse than Stephen and had to have surgery, and they died afterwards when they were 4 or 5 years old. God, and I am so sorry for those parents. I'm sorry they had to go through it. I don't understand why. And it's not because God hates them. I don't understand why God does everything He does.
Didn't God need another angel?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Don't get me started.
Don't go there.
But the thing is that. So we know that we've been blessed in ways that we didn't deserve. Yeah. Why weren't those people blessed? I don't know. I know that God's sovereign, God's Lord, and God knows more than we do. Yeah. In 10,000 years from now, He's going to tell us why, and then we're going to be like, oh, I would have done the same thing. Yeah. Because He knows what's right to do. He doesn't do anything wrong. Yeah. It just doesn't mean it's always going to be easy for us. That's right. And it's not always going to be what we want, for sure.
Exactly.
But the thing is that we need to worry about spiritual healing before anything physical.
Yeah.
I would rather have a physical disability and be right with Jesus than to be healed physically and the most fit person on this world, but then die and go to hell.
Yeah.
What profited a man if he gained the whole world and loses his own soul?
That's right.
Yeah.
You know,
Are we ready for the Southern Word of the Day?
we are. Didn't we have music for that?
I think you had
You
to
got
add it
banjos?
later.
Is that what I need to do? I don't know.
Put some banjo in
You
there.
can. Anyway, my word for today, and I guess, I don't know if it's just a Southern word. They may use this up north, but I don't know. But it's highfalutin. So if you are not from the South and you don't know what highfalutin means, that means somebody's
Uppity.
pretentious, uppity, pompous. They're highfalutin.
They're highfalutin.
I've
That's
heard
it.
her use this a few
But
times.
thank you for tuning in. Share this
thank
with
you for
your
joining
friends. Oh, yes. Thank
Well,
you
he
for
kind of
having
lives
me.
here, so
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, but we usually don't let him down here.
that is true.
Just kidding.
And
I usually like myself in my bedroom.
you can find us on YouTube, Rumble, and I think somewhere else.
Spotify.
But especially for YouTube, log in, share it, like it, because the more subscribes we get, the longer we can do this. So thank you so
Thank
much.
y'all.
And thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.